Chapter 15, Proverbs chapter 15, is the final chapter of Solomon's writings that focus specifically on individual governance. I think we talked about that in Solomon's specific writings from chapter 10 up until now, chapter 15. Solomon is focusing on specifically your individual governance, you know, your own character and integrity of the individual heart. And so this is what chapter 15 is going to be about. Because remember, chapters 10 through 22 are a collection of Solomon's writings. And a lot of them are comparing and contrasting statements. But chapter 15 is the last chapter that focuses on the individual. And although there isn't one unifying theme to this chapter, it does talk about your speech, the ability to accept rebuke, prayer, and having the right perspective, taking things into perspective, okay? And so, there's so many other wonderful tidbits on that, but we're going to go ahead and start. So, verses 1 through 7 talk about a heart that spreads knowledge. A heart that spreads knowledge, okay? So verses 1 and 2 specifically talk about speech. And so let's go ahead and read verses 1 and 2. And let's go ahead and start with you, Sister Ray. Yes, ma'am.
A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger.
Mm-hmm.
The tongue of the wise uses knowledge aright, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness.
Yes. And I want to say that verbal communication seems to be a very recurring topic in this chapter. It appears in verse 1, verse 2, verse 4, verse 7, verse 23, verse 26, verse 28. So speech, okay? What you say. And when we're talking about a soft answer turns away wrath, we're talking about a gentle response. Harsh words, provocative words always stir up anger because they are made emotionally. So the words are charged with emotion themselves. So if you have something that's charged with emotion and you fling it out, the person that gets hit with it is going to be hit with the same emotion, the same charge of emotion. And parts of the verses in this chapter are teaching you how to think before you lob your words. Mm-hmm. And when words are emotionally lobbed at you and you're hit by them, how not to take on the emotion of the word. Does it make sense? Makes sense. You think about a bullet. If a bullet is, or a dart, let's say a dart. If a dart is laced with poison, right? Mm-hmm. The dart is just going to hit you and hurt you anyway. But if it's laced with something, it's going to get in the bloodstream, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So if your words are a dart, right, and they're laced with something, that is what is going to get into the bloodstream. So mm-hmm. a lot of these verses are teaching us, first of all, to think about what we're lacing our words with. And then secondly, if you are hit by a dart that is laced with something, how to respond, okay? So it's saying a soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger, mm-hmm. warning us about the emotion attached to the words. Because when we're angry, we want to share our anger. We want people to be as angry as we are. We want them to feel our emotions. So it's saying that if that is not your intention, if your intention is resolution, if your intention is absolution, especially like if you're the one that was wrong and you want someone to forgive you, if your intention is to just be angry, then go ahead and keep talking the way you're talking. But if your intention is to get somewhere with your words, think about how you say it. Okay, there you go. Now, okay, I would love also for us to speak about, so let's read verses, I would say 3 through 7, verses 3 through 7, they're all dealing with something different. But I just want go ahead and just read verses 3 through 7. So, Sister Sandy, can you read chapter 15, verses 3 through 7?
It's chapter 15.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The eyes of the Lord are in every place,
Mhm.
beholding the evil and the good. A wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness therein is a breach in the spirit. A fool despises father's instruction,
Mhm.
but he that regardeth reproof is prudent.
Mhm.
In the house of righteousness is much treasure, than the
Revenues.
revenues are nothing.
Yeah.
Of the wicked is trouble. The
Mhm.
lips of the wise disperse knowledge, but the heart of the foolish do it not so.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So, verse 3 is talking about the omniscience of God. Omniscience of God. Omniscient means the state of knowing everything. So, there are several verses in this chapter that are actually going to um, remind us that God knows everything, right? It says the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding good and evil. Don't think that God doesn't see. Don't think that God doesn't hear. I know a young lady recently was sharing with me that she did not think that the Lord loved her or that she heard or that God heard her because some negative things were done to her. And seemingly the person who did these negative things did not come to justice. There seemed to be nothing that happened to this person that she could see or that she wanted or the way that she wanted it. She even pursued justice and it was not given. But I had to remind her that just because punishment wasn't administered or met out the way you think it is, don't think for 1 minute that God didn't see. Don't think for 1 minute that God will not judge. But God's judgment is above ours. His ways are above ours. And so don't take this person needing to atone for their actions as an excuse for you not to atone for yours or to have a relationship with God on your own. I would have a relationship with God, but I don't see him doing anything to him. You understand what I'm saying? I don't see him doing anything to her. No, there's two different relationships here. You let God be the God of both you and be the God of them, So both of you will stand before the judgment seat of God one day. So how do you want to stand before him? As somebody that was waiting for him to administer judgment to somebody else? And so I'm waiting, Lord. I'll serve you when you do this. God says, oh no, who do you think you are? How about we have our own relationship and let me have a relationship with them? But my relationship with them has nothing to do with my relationship with you. Does that make sense? And so the omniscience of God, God knows everything. And then verse 3 is specifically about speech. Once again, we see an admonishment to think before you speak. The first one was don't speak hotly in anger. And this one is allowing your words to be wholesome. Whatever it is that you are about to say, have you thought it through? And what is the goal of it? Is the goal of it some wholesome goal? And then verse 5 is talking about accepting rebuke or accepting correction. And I know that it can be very difficult for us to do that, even when we know that we are wrong, right? We have a defense mechanisms that kick in, justifications that kick in, but know that if you learn to hear what is being said, what is not being said is that you are horrible, that you have no merit, that you have no reason to feel the way you feel, that you had no reason to do what you did. Don't hear in the correction what is not there. The correction is saying, how can I make you a better person? And so hear the part that you can swallow that will bring health to your own heart and health to your own soul. How can you be better? And if you are hearing correction in that way, not as an attack, but as what kind of vitamin from this can I take that is going to fill me up with something good and wholesome that I can go forward with? Then, of course, it's going to make you even more prudent, more wise, more smart, more able to make good decisions, sound decisions. Okay. Verse 6 talks about the reward of the righteous and the wicked. Verse 7 talks about the wise and the foolish. Okay. The wise and the foolish. Um, and so verses 8 through 12 talk about the heart that pursues knowledge. Verses 8 through 12. So verses 1 through 7 was the heart that spreads knowledge. What are we spreading? And now verses 8 through 12 are talking about the heart that pursues knowledge. I'm looking for it. I want to know more. Okay, so Sister Sharita, why don't you just go ahead and read verses 8 through 12?
The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight.
Mm-hmm.
The way of the wicked is an abomination unto the Lord, but he loveth him that followeth after righteousness.
Yes.
Correction is grievous unto him that forsaketh the way, and he that hateth reproof shall die. Hell and destruction are before the Lord. How much more then the hearts of the children of men?
Mm.
A scorner loveth not one that reproveth him, neither will he go unto the wise.
Yes. Okay. So verse 8 talks about prayer. Okay. Verse 8 talks about prayer. We're pursuing knowledge. How do you get knowledge? You pray and you ask the Lord for it. Verse 9 contrasts the righteous and the wicked. We're talking about pursuing knowledge. And it says, but he loveth him that followeth after the righteous, after righteousness. The Lord loves people that are seeking righteousness, that are trying to be better. You know, he understands that we're not perfect, but we're trying, we're seeking it, right? 10 is talking about accepting rebuke. Once again, right? If you hate it, you're going to die. Why? Because you're not going to make the changes that are going to lead to life. Anytime God is correcting you, it's not because he just doesn't like you or like what you're doing. Sometimes we correct our kids because we're mad, we're frustrated, we're angry, we feel a certain way, we have a certain preference. God's rebuke isn't about preference and about his feelings. Anytime he corrects us, it's because he wants us to live better, live longer, right? It's not an emotionally charged thing, okay? And then verse 11 is speaking about God's omniscience, right? God's omniscience. Other verses that are similar to this is in chapter 20, verse 4, verse 12. And also speaking about the eyes of God being everywhere is chapter 22 and 12 and 24 and 18. So these verses all are similar or are in alignment. They agree with one another about the omniscience of God, okay? So it says, hell and destruction are before the Lord. How much more then the hearts of the children of men? Basically saying that if God is able to see all the way down into the depths of hell, which we cannot see, how much more is he able to see all the way down into the depths of your heart? You know, we think about the depths of hell, this unknown secret place full of tortures and torments, right? God also, the heart, this unknown, dark, secret place that are also full of tortures sometimes. Because when we speak about the heart, we're really talking about the mind, right? Not the brain itself, but the mind. And how it processes and what it thinks, you know, what it's yielded to. God can see all of that. And the same way God pursues and tries to save us from the pit of hell, to change our course, to change our direction, the same way he pursues the deeper inner parts of our heart when it is also dark and not right. He's trying to change our course. He's constantly trying to plant a seed, water a seed, cut a thorn, uproot a rock, you know, build a hedge about a truth, you know, in those same ways, God sees the depths of us and he understands the depths of us. Okay? There's nothing that can be hid from the eyes of God, not even your thoughts. Now, Satan does not know your thoughts. He can study you and he can know your proclivities. He can know your likes and dislikes because he studies you, but he doesn't know what you're doing or thinking at that moment. But God does. He knows the sincerity. That is why Paul can be killing people on one day and God speaks to him and he completely changes the next because God knew Paul's heart, which is different from the heart of those who hate God. You understand? So on the surface, we would be like, God, kill him, destroy him. What you mean? Go and preach to him. What you mean? Go heal his eyes. Don't you know who he is? God's like, yes, I do. So go. God knows the heart of a person. And so you be careful when we're judging people because God knows the heart. You don't, right? Okay. But he knows yours too. All right. So that was one of the verses we wanted to stop and spend a little time on, right? Sister, did that cover it or is there? Okay.
Yeah, that's really helps.
Verse 12 is talking about, once again, accepting rebuke. See this theme? Yes. Learn to hear what rebuke is, what correction is, what reproof is, and learn what it is not. It is not something that's supposed to charge you emotionally and make you defensive. It is something that's supposed to make you great and better because God only corrects those that he loves. If he didn't care, he'd let you go the way of the world. But because he cares, he is going to correct you. Amen. All right. Now, verse 13 deals with emotions, and verse 14 contrasts the wise and the foolish. And I'm just going to read those two real quick. A merry heart maketh a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart the spirit is broken. And verse 14, the heart of him that hath understanding seeketh knowledge, but the mouth of fools feeds on foolishness. Okay. And so, warning us about our emotions, right? And how to guard them, our own emotions, how to guard the emotions of others, and also the difference between the wise and the foolish. Okay. But I want to get to this next section, which is a heart that enjoys knowledge, right? You enjoy learning more, okay, getting better. And this is from verses 13 through 25. That's a lot of verses to read all at once. So, Sister Green, why don't you just read verse 15 through 18?
15, wait a minute. We're on 15, so read, which one, 13?
Could you read verses 15?
Okay, in verse,
All the days,
Huh?
verse 15, all the days of the afflicted.
Oh, I see, okay. All the days of the afflicted are evil, but he that sees of a merry heart has a continuous feast. And where else am I going to?
All the way to 18.
Oh, all the way to 18, okay. Okay. Better, 16, better is little with the fear of the Lord than great treasures and trouble therewith. And 17 says, better is the dinner of herbs where love is man, and stalled ox and hatred therewith. And 18 is a wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger oppresseth strife. Appeaseth strife.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, good. Okay. So, verse 15 is talking about wealth and happiness.
Mhm.
Wealth and happiness. Okay. The rich may have it better than the poor in terms of financial ease, right? But these verses that are going to be dealing with wealth in this chapter and really going forward, is saying that you have to take wealth in perspective. Everything is to be taken in perspective. Okay. So when it says all of the days of the afflicted are evil, but he that is of a merry heart hath a continual feast. Even if you gain, often speaking of those who gain their wealth in an evil way, um, that all their days are going to be afflicted. Okay. All the days of the afflicted are evil. Or not just that, but those who don't have it, if you're poor every day when you're waking up on that sidewalk, it can seem like you have an evil life. It's terrible. Living in poverty, living under the bridge. You know what I'm saying? But he that is of a merry heart hath a continual feast. Even though your circumstances are not what they should be, it's about the heart. Have you ever met people who are very poor, but just had a great perspective on life, had a great outlook on life? And those who were in the same economic place, that poor, hate life. You know what I'm saying? And I want to say this: if you learn to love life when you have little, as you get more, you will continue to love life, and your joy will not come from your riches. If you are poor, but you have no contentment, as you get more money, it is like almost like a hole. You have this cup that has a hole in it. No matter how much more wealth you put into the cup, it will drain. Money will be wasted. There will be no contentment. There will be no fulfillment. It can really just be this never-ending cycle. Sometimes you see people who have a lot of money and they don't look like it, but they're so content. And you have people who have very little money or no money or mid money and who seemingly can get what they want, and there's no contentment there. And the Lord taught me this because, of course, you growing up, you may not have a lot of money, but as you begin to earn more, I didn't understand how to spend money because my thought was where I was terrible. But as soon as I make more money, I'll be able to buy more stuff. I'll be able to have more convenience, more ease. I won't have to work so hard. So as I began to make more money, I spent more, or I spent it in the wrong way. You understand what I'm trying to say? But I believe that if I had been content, I could have learned a little bit more about money or how to use it, or that my contentment, this chocolate was not going to help me. You understand? Or this closet full of clothes was not going to make me a better person. It wasn't going to make me happier. It wasn't going to make me fulfilled. So the thing is, you may stay poor for the rest of your life, but stay happy. But if you get blessed, learn to be content with what you have, so that as you get more, you can use it wisely. You won't be using it to fill up a hole. Does that make sense? You won't be using it in this way, because then 10 years later, I'm like, what do I have to show for it? How much did I save? How much did I understand? How much did I grow? So much you don't understand, because then your comforter becomes money, which once it is spent is gone. So then your comfort is gone. But if your comfort is Christ, if your comfort is God, then as you get more money, you'll spend it better. But when it's gone, like Job said, hey, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Yes. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And so I'm just advocating contentment. Okay. So verse 16 is speaking of the fear of the Lord. Okay. Not all righteous people will be wealthy. So this is all still dealing with this wealth issue. Make sure that you fear the Lord, because that is where your contentment is going to come from. Okay. Verse 17 is about love. Okay. Because money or wealth cannot substitute love. Okay. That contentment is going to come there because the love is there. Okay. A hot temper, okay, is verse 18. A wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeaseth strife. Okay, once again, thinking about what you're doing, not being emotionally charged, because that charge is going to replicate itself, right? But if you're slow to anger, you have that patience, you have the temperance that we're talking about when we studied the fruits of the Spirit. You will know how to appease strife. Strife will come. It's going to come. So don't act like you don't know it's going to come. So don't be reactive. Be proactive. Okay. Okay. Being deliberate in our speech, taking time to thoughtfully respond without emotion. Okay. All right. Now let's go ahead and read verse 19 through, I'm just taking it down to 25, Sister Ray.
The way of the slothful man is an hedge of thorns, but the way of the righteous is made plain. A wise son maketh a glad father, but the foolish man despiseth his mother. Folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom, but a man of understanding walketh uprightly. Without counsel purposes are disappointed, but with the multitude of counselors they are established.
Yes.
A man hath joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good is it?
Yes.
The way of life is above to the wise, that he may depart from hell beneath.
Yes.
The Lord will destroy the house of the proud, but he will establish the border of the widow.
Yes. Verse 19 speaks about laziness, right? Laziness, about not taking care of business. And I heard something this week, and it's really encouraged me that the Lord came, in Genesis, between verses 1 and 2, God created everything. It was great, but by verse 2, it was all crazy, right? There is chaos. And God fixed the chaos. It was dark, he made light, right? Waters were running over the earth, he separated that. The earth was barren, he brought forth the green grass and the fruit of the land and the flowers and the trees and all these beautiful things, right? And the earth needed life. He brought animals from the earth. He just said, let there be, right? He spoke these things into existence. And the fish, the waters were empty. He spoke to the waters, and the earth underneath the waters gave up the fish, right? He brought order to chaos. Laziness creates chaos. And we may have our reasons for laziness or procrastination or putting off something that should be done. Maybe we don't want to or feel like it. Maybe it brings us fear and anxiety. Maybe it's too hard, so we avoid it. There's so many reasons. Just because a person is lazy or they don't take care of business well doesn't mean they're not a good person. But it does mean that they are not operating in decency and in order. And God spoke to all these things and brought order to it. But when it was time to make man, he spoke to himself. Let us make man. So God is a spirit. He made man, but man needed a suit, right? Or a body. So he made the body from the dirt, but he spoke to himself to create us. God is a God of order. So when he spoke to himself and he created us, he meant for us to live a life of order because he is in order. Satan is the one that brings chaos. So he's going to make it to where we don't want to pursue our goals, our priorities, do it on time, do it the right way, believe in ourselves that we can do it, prey upon our feelings and emotions, because he wants us to live in chaos. But remember, we were created in the image of God. We're not meant to live in chaos. So when you think of your laziness or you think of something that you put off, God, I'm putting this thing off because I think it's hard. God, I'm putting this thing off because I'm afraid of it. God, I'm putting this thing off just because I don't want to do it. Then you can take those things and say, but give me your mind. How would you handle this, Lord? I don't feel like doing this. This is fearful to me, but you haven't given me a spirit of fear. So let me stop putting it off. Or this is too big for me, but it's not too big for you. So let me stop putting it off. You know, God, I don't like this. It's not my preference, but it is my responsibility. And because I'm in you, I'm sure Christ didn't like or prefer to die on the cross, but give me the mind of Christ. So we will approach things that we have a lazy heart towards differently when we realize that God meant for us to be like him. Decent, order. And that is why we can't function in disorder. Why we can't function well in disorder. We can probably do it for so long, but we can't do it because we're created in the image of God. And things work better. Classrooms work better. Things work better when businesses work better when there's order, right? Because we were created in the image of God. So the way of the slothful is a hedge of thorns. Why? Because things just pile up to where it's like a thorn choking you. But the way of the righteous is made plain. So do what you need to do. Don't put it off. And if whatever the reason is for putting it off, bring it back to the Lord and let him show you what to do, because you're made in his image. And nothing is too hard for him. That means nothing is too hard for you. Okay? 21 contrasts the wise and the foolish. Verse 22 speaks about counsel. Without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors they are established. One thing that is most desired of a wise person is advice. People go to people for advice all the time. Learn how to build up your own store of knowledge so that you may be the wise. It has broken my heart, and I had to really pray about it when I went to someone who I felt was wise, and I asked them a question, and they said, oh, well, they didn't want to give me an answer. They didn't want to be the one to share or to say, or they sent me to Google. You know what I'm saying? I was thinking, I'm thinking this meal is amazing. Can you tell me? Oh, well, you could just Google how to make it. I wanted you to tell me how to make it because I really wanted your wise counsel. And some people are afraid, they don't want to say things. And so they're like, they don't want to be the one that's quoted. But it has hurt me the most when I've gone to someone and wanted help, wanted wisdom, and was turned away. So work on your wisdom, become wise, because you will be sought after for your wisdom. People want to know, a right word at a right time. Verse 23 talks about witty remarks. Once again, those right words at a right time, right? Verse 24 talks about the wise. And verse 25 talks about divine anger and sympathy. Okay. Widows were particularly vulnerable at this time. Okay. And God took their care, widows and orphans, the poor, very seriously, especially to whom much is given, much is required. There was an expectation that you would be a blessing. Yes. Okay. So verse 26 through 28 talk about a heart that ponders knowledge. A heart that ponders knowledge. Hearts that actually, once you have pursued it, you think about it. Do you ever know how to do something, but you don't use it? It's not for lack of knowing. It's for lack of doing.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Okay. Verses 29 through 33, for the sake of time, I'm just going to keep going. Talk about a heart that acquires knowledge, right? Acquires even more knowledge. So it lets us know that you're never finished pursuing and acquiring it, right? You can pursue something, but to acquire it means to grab it and take it with you. It means to purchase it, to make it your own, to possess it, right? So, yes, we want to pursue it, we want to think about it, but after a while, we want it to be ours, right? We want to live in it. Yeah, we want to wield it, to use it, right? Okay, and so that was verses 29 through 33. Okay, and so let's go on to chapter 16. And in chapter 16, this is leadership training, very specific. And we are all leaders in our homes, ladies. We are all leaders in our community. We are all leaders among one another. We are all leaders at some point. We all oversee, mentor, encourage at some point. And so this is important. Okay. So we're dealing with the heart of the person, and now we're dealing with the heart of the person that's in control of other hearts. Okay. So some of the topics in this collection are the king, haughtiness or pride, right? God's relation to man, and speech, once again. Okay. Also, the sovereign actions of the Lord are more emphasized, will begin to be emphasized even more. You see Lord, 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 over and over and over again, because a leader should want to be like the Lord, not like somebody else. So this leadership training is in terms of how can we be more like God and follow God's leadership versus culture or society or man. Okay? So God's sovereignty is seen in verses 1 through 15, meaning that God is in control. One thing that a leader must know is that God is over the leader. God sets up leaders and he demotes leaders all the time. And these leaderships are used for his glory. Even those that are wicked, even those that are righteous, God has a purpose for all leadership. And so what the leader must know is that you are not God, but you answer to God. Okay? So verses 1 through 2 talk about our plans. God has sovereign rulership over our plans. Okay? Verse 3 talks about trusting in God. And verse 4 talks about everything having a purpose. Verse 5 talks about, well, let's go ahead and let's read these. I don't want to not read them. Sister Sandy, can you just read for us verses 1 through 9? I know that's a big chunk.
The preparation of the heart and man, and the answer comes from the Lord. All the ways of a man are clean in his own eyes, but the Lord waiteth the spirit.
Yes.
Commit thy work unto the Lord, and thy thou shalt be established. The Lord hath made all things for himself be, even the wicked for the day of evil.
Yes.
Everyone is proud in heart and abomination to the Lord. Though hands join in hand, he shall not be unpunished. By mercy and truth and equity is pure, and by the fear of the Lord men depart from evil.
Yes.
When a man ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies believe that he is him.
Yes.
Begin 8 to
Through 9.
Okay. That is a little righteousness and great revenues without right. A man's heart devised his way, but the Lord directed his steps.
Yes. Okay. Yes, ma'am. So, like we said, verse 1 and 2 are talking about Our plans, bringing them before God. Verse 3, trusting in God. Verse 4, everything has a purpose. Good, bad, God has a purpose for everything. Haughtiness or pride, even that, you have to know that it will not go unpunished. It says, even though hand join in hand, even though they all agree, even though they all gang up on you, even though it seems like, yes, ma'am, go for it.
Oh, you didn't have to stop your thought.
Yes,
I was just gonna comment briefly on verse 3,
please do.
just because I listened to a commentary about it by Vernon McGee. We call him Grandpa McGee.
Yeah.
He's so great. Old days. But it's also here in my Bible talking about the word commit literally means to roll upon.
Mhm.
And his example was like, as a leader of the church or like a pastor or whatever, like those nights where you can't sleep.
Yeah.
He's like, I literally on purpose will roll over and think about that word commit, and be like, Lord, I'm rolling my worries, I'm rolling my plans, I'm rolling my thoughts onto you.
Yeah.
And that just really jumped out for me.
Yes.
Of like something physically tangible to do, but then no, really give those things to him.
Yes.
And he will handle it, show you, establish what needs to happen.
I like that analogy of rolling, or even the definition of the word being rolling, because you may not be able to pick it up and carry it to him, but you can roll it, right? So it's not even something that God expect. He does say cast your burdens, which means throw violently your burdens on him, but sometimes you can only roll it because it's that heavy, So I like that analogy of rolling those thoughts on him. I love that, sister. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes. So even though in verse 5, the haughtiness of the wicked, even though it seems like they're all ganging up against you, they won't go unpunished. Even if it seems like they're the majority, it won't go unpunished. And okay. And verse 6 talks about atonement and the fear of God. Verse 7 speaks about the enemies, your enemies, okay? That God can make even your enemies at peace with you, okay? Verse 8 speaks about righteousness. And verse 9 speaks about your plans, right? And you have to bring those plans to God, because it may seem right to you, but if you don't check off with them, there's so many times in the Word of God where a leader thought that this was the right thing to do, or other minds around them said that this was the right thing to do, only in hindsight to find out that it was not only the wrong thing to do, but it destroyed them as well as others. So make sure that even though you bring in your mind to God, verses 10 through 15, chapter 16, verses 10 through 15, speak about God's sovereignty over kings. So God is over our plans, but God also has the right to judge the king. Okay? Judge the king. Sister Sharita, can you read verses 10 through 15?
A divine sentence is in the lips of the king. His mouth transgresseth not in judgment. A just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights of the bag are his work. It is an abomination to kings to commit wickedness, for the throne is established by righteousness. Righteous lips are the delight of kings, and they love him that speaketh right. The wrath of a king is as messengers of death, but a wise man will pacify it. In the light of the king's countenance is life, and his favor is a cloud of a latter rain.
Yes. So during this time, the king would almost be like the Supreme Court, right? Maybe there are these lesser courts that you can go to and appeal all the way up, to this higher court. But the king had authority, and so the Lord is reminding the king that even your judgments, I need to be over. Even the punishments that you mete out, they need to be brought to me, because how will you have good judgment? How do you know right and wrong if you can't see the heart of a person? How do you know what is the right judgment if you don't know the future? How do you really know or understand this particular thing, especially when it's not even in your wheelhouse? You know, maybe the king never farmed, but the judgment has to be between farmers, or the king never did, it's not a doctor, but so what happens in our courts? You get all these experts coming up, right? And the experts will usually say, whatever it is that the prosecution or the defense want to say. But the fact is, because the judge doesn't have all of this information, but God does. So before you judge someone as wanting, take it to the Lord, because you don't have all the information. So God's reminding a king, you may have the authority and the power to mete out justice, but is it justice if you don't ask me? How do you know that you're meting out justice? And to whom much is given, much is required. The king must answer for the judgments that the king makes. So you better know that if you're the one if you're wrong, you must have to answer to the Lord. You better make the right judgment. You know what I'm saying? Because this is between y'all. You know what I'm saying? This is between y'all. I'm not about to make the wrong judgment so that I'm up in this y'allness. No, I'm I'm not trying to get judged. This was y'all's thing. So, Lord, what should I say? You understand what I mean? And so sometimes, we're talking about bribes and doing things for people that you really like, and your preferences. The Lord says, make sure that this is the right judgment, because you're going to answer to me. So verse 16 through 24 talk about the wisdom of God, the wisdom of God. And specifically verses 16 through 20 speak about the significance of God's wisdom. Why is his wisdom so important? Okay. And so I'm going to ask Sister Ray, can you read 16 through 24?
How much better is it to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding rather to be chosen than silver? The highway of the upright is to depart from evil. He that keepeth his way preserveth his soul. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Better it is to be of an humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. He that handleth a matter wisely shall find good, and whoso trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. The wise in heart shall be called prudent, and the sweetness of the lips increaseth not learning. Understanding is a wellspring of life unto him that hath it, but the instruction of fools is folly. The heart of the wise teacheth his mouth, and addeth learning to his lips.
Yes.
Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and help to the bones.
Yes, ma'am.
There is
just stop at 24. Thank you, my beautiful sister. Okay, so verse 16. Okay, so remember 16 through 24 talk about the wisdom of God, but specifically 16 through 20 talk about the significance of God's wisdom. So the value of his wisdom is found in verse 16. The proper path, the right way to go, the right choices to make. Verse 17 deals with that. Verses 18 through 19 warn us against arrogance and humility in thinking that God's wisdom is not important, or not understanding the significance of God's wisdom. That arrogance and humility, verses 18 through 19. So verse 20 speaks about wisdom in regards to those who trust in God. God's wisdom doesn't always make sense. His wisdom does not always make sense to man's mind, right? But the wise one trusts that if God says throw a branch in the water and it's going to go from poisonous and bitter to sweet and clean, that is what's going to happen, right? You understand what I mean? His wisdom doesn't always make sense, but a wise person will never question him. will never question him, right? All right. And so verses 21 through 24 specifically speak of the sweetness of God's wisdom. So 21 through 24, the sweetness of his wisdom, and then wisdom as specifically as it deals with wise words, the words of the wise, okay? The words of the wise. Okay, so I want to go ahead and go here, and I'm just going to break these things down from verses 25 to verse 33. Talks about the ways of man. There are a lot of different men that are going to be represented in these verses. The ways of man, verses 25 through 33. And so remember, this is teaching kings, or basically asking, what kind of man will you be? Okay, so a godless man is what we see in verse 25. A godless man and his plans are what we see in verse 25. There's a way that seemeth right to a man, but in the end thereof are the ways of death. Okay. The second man we see is the way of the working man in verse 26. The way of the working man, right? He that laboreth, laboreth for himself, for his mouth craveth it of him, right? He that laboreth, laboreth for himself, for his mouth craveth it of him, right? You're going to get hungry. That is going to be your motivation, not just hunger, but the things that you hunger for in life will motivate you to work hard. Now, verse 27 through 30 talk about the ways of wicked men. So the worthless man is seen in verse 27. The worthless man, an ungodly man diggeth up evil, and in his lips there is a burning fire. Worthless. The ways of a perverse man in verse 28. A froward man soweth strife, and a whisperer separateth chief friends. What kind of man are you going to be? Are you going to be one that digs up evil? Stirs up fires with your words? Are you going to be ones that sow strife? Are you going to be one of those ones that's always trying to sow division? Are you going to whisper, try to, separate chief friends? Are you a person that divides people? We all knew those kind of people, even in high school, the gossipers. It was terrible. Or the ones that are always accusing others of things. Right. Are you going to be a violent man, as in verse 29? A violent man enticeth his neighbor and leadeth him into the way that is not good, right? What about a scheming man in verse 30? He shutteth his eyes and deviseth froward things. He's always imagining the most wicked things. Sometimes I think, who came up with that? Who actually took time to think about that? That is ridiculous. It's evil. It's like, who even thinks of stuff like that, right? A scheming man, moving his lips, he bringeth evil to pass. Terrible, right? Yes. Now, verses 31 through 33 speak about the ways of the righteous, okay? The way of the gray-haired man in 16 and 31, or those who have lived life long enough, that old age is to be... you should have learned some things. The hoary head is a crown of glory, or the gray hair, if it be found in the way of righteousness, right? Only if it be found in the way of righteousness. There are a lot of gray-haired, unrighteous people out there, okay? The way of the patient man is found in verse 32, self-control. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. Be in control of your spirit. The way of a godly man is found in verse 33. The lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is the Lord, meaning your plans. The lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is the Lord. Okay. Sister Sharita had a question about verse 25. And verse 25 says, "There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death." So this is a caution to all of us to take heed. Be careful of deceiving yourself. We deceive ourselves. We deceive even our own souls when we do not take these things to the Lord. This isn't someone else deceiving you. This is coming to your own conclusions. And I think it is not difficult to change the heart of someone who's heard something.
Mm-hmm.
If they heard something from somebody that's wrong, all you have to do is just tell them a truth. And it's seemingly those truths are received. The hardest person to change is a person that has deceived themselves into believing a lie.
Mm-hmm.
No, Sister Brown, he meant this. I know what he said. I know what everybody else is telling me, but this is it. When you believe it in your own heart, when you deceive yourself, that is something that takes God a long time to change. So he's warning us, when you have deceived yourself and you continue to hold on to something and believe it and rehearse it, it takes a lot more to undo that. So be careful of what you believe. Run that thing down. Bring it before the Lord. Look at it in scripture. Deceiving yourself is what will take the longest to change. Have you found that? Like somebody can believe something different and say, "Oh, no. The Food and Drug Administration says that such and such and such," and they're like, "Oh, okay." But they thought that this temperature was the right temperature. "Oh, no, this is the right temperature." "Oh, no problem." But when it's talking about something, no. It's, no, this is the way that it has to be. Even if you're presented with facts, you won't believe it. And so be careful, because it takes a long time to undo those things. Yes. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for being in Bible study today. I love you, and I can't wait to pray. God bless you.
Are we doing these or we not doing these?
Sister, what we are doing, let me do it this way. Sister,